Here you go. And now I will allow everybody in. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Once again, and this time for the last time, for this edition, 11th edition, we gathered together for the webinar, this time with our sponsor, La Primafit and Amacx. I will just ask everybody, maybe I'm going to mute everybody because otherwise it's going to be a bit, yeah. So welcome everybody. Today's topic is going to be about nutrition and how to fuel yourself before the race, during the race, and after the race. I'm very happy to introduce you to Gregor and Julie from La Primafit and Amacx. Maybe if you want, like we are like already kind of used to, you can share with us in the chat where are you coming from and what distance you are doing. So maybe Gregor and Julie can see what kind of warriors are coming to UTVV. And now, Gregor, it's you.
Anya, thank you. Guys, warm welcomes from my side. My name is Gregor and I'm head of sales at MovePro GmbH, the company that officially distributes Amacx in Germany, Austria, Slovenia, Croatia, and Serbia. I will be also your host at Amacx stand at UTVV in Vipava in 1 month, actually. I'm looking forward to meet all of you. So if you will have any questions after the webinar today, you can reach out to me on email. You can also, I will be happy to meet you guys in person at Vipava. I will be also there personally because I like the event. I like the organizers. We are quite good friends now. And if I recall correctly, Anya, we will be nutrition partner for the next 2 or 3 years. I think 3 years.
I think
actually.
3.
yeah.
Yes.
Because we were at UTVV last year for the first time, and we like the event, we like the vibe, we like the athletes around. And as said, please, after the webinar, now Julia will slowly take over. We have one kind of surprise for you guys, so don't go until the end because we have one big surprise for you guys. And also, as said, all the questions, please ask Julie. I will also support her, but I'm leaving the nutrition part to her because she's experienced, and also she have maybe more intels because I'm more sales guy. I was also studying sports nutrition, but now I'm more focused on sales and maybe PR stuff, but nutrition and science is her part. So Julie, thank you from my side also that you joined. Guys, Julie is from Netherlands, from the Amacx headquarters, and I really appreciate that she is with us today and that she's also supporting us as a distributor in the region. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Gregor, for the introduction. And I'm really happy to be here to talk to you about trail running and nutrition today. I was just looking in the chats, and it's nice to see there are people from different places. I see the Czech Republic, Slovenia, the Netherlands as well. So that's really nice to see. I will share my screen now. So please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, everything is okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, well, first of all, I would like to thank Anya from UTVV and Gregor, of course, as well from La Primafit for hosting this webinar and for having me here. Really happy to be here. So first, an introduction about myself. I think that's always nice to get to know the person that's talking. So My name is Julie. I'm living in the Netherlands, but I'm actually from Belgium. So that's close by. So the last couple of years, I've been relocated to the Netherlands. And as you can see on the pictures, yeah, my passion is also in sports and especially in the mountains. So my passion is cycling and trail running as well. That's why I'm also really happy to be here with you guys today. So my background is in exercise physiology, and I did research at the Ghent University in Belgium in muscle fiber typology. And then after that, I did an extra degree in sports nutrition at the International Olympic Committee. And nowadays, I guide mostly endurance athletes since there's my biggest interest. But of course, my main job is working for Amacx as a sports nutritionist, and I'm also part of the R&D team. So I also research and develop new products. So I will just introduce Amacx and then I will go into the nutrition part of today. So Amacx is as Gregor said, we are based in Netherlands. So we are a sports nutrition company based in the Netherlands. And we work together mainly with a lot of professional cycling teams like EF Education, Visma Lease Bike from the Netherlands, also Pinarello Q36.5 from Tom Pitcock that you can see here on the slide already. But we also partner with a lot of other sports. And recently we announced our partnership with Ironman as an official recovery nutrition sponsor for the coming years. So that's really exciting times for us. So really quick, if I only need to say 3 uniques about Amacx, I would say first of all, that we have a consistent amount of carbs per product line because we really want to make fueling easy. So I will talk more about this later, but as you can see here, we have an energy and a turbo line. So all our blue products are part of the energy line. They all have 30 grams of carbs. And then we have a turbo line, the black products, and each product has 40 grams of carbs per hour. So you know, okay, if I take up to 90 grams of carbs per hour, I need to use the blue products. You can mix and match. If you go higher than that, you can use the black products. Then second, we really want to provide a full range of products. So from fuel to recovery, as you can see here on the pictures, and we really look into what is known in the science in the development of our products. And that also brings us to the third unique, so an incredible digestibility. That's really something that for us is super important. So we, for example, don't add artificial colorings and flavorings. We really only want to put into the products the ingredients that can help you to perform better, and not just additionals that would be good for marketing. That's really not what we strive for. So to the outline of today. So in today's webinar, I will talk about the importance of day-to-day nutrition. And then I will also stress the role of carbohydrates for trail running. And of course, also about training the gut, which is really important for ultras, and also carb loading. Then after that, I will tackle hydration and sodium replacement because I see that there are also mainly a lot of questions about these topics. Then I will talk about some recovery strategies that you can apply, and then I will bring all of the backgrounds together to help you and guide you through how to fuel your training, taper, and race day. And then I will end with talking about some performance supplements that may benefit for you. So of course, I know nutrition is not a one-size-fits-all approach. So where I can, I will try to add some nuance to the general recommendations. But of course, at the end of this webinar, there will be a Q&A. So please already write some questions down in the chat so you don't forget them along the way. And then we have some time to discuss them. So if we talk about nutrition, it's really important to show you this pyramid. So on the bottom, you can see the foundation. That's really a healthy, balanced diet. So that's the most important. Then the middle layer, we have sports specific nutrition. So think about gels, bars, sport drinks, etc. And then the top of the pyramids are dietary supplements. So we mostly divide them in health supplements and performance supplements. I will talk more about that later. But why I want to show you this is because what I see as a practitioner is that a lot of athletes look at this pyramid from the top to the bottom instead of the other way around. However, a proper fundament is really key for each athlete, because what I see is that a lot of athletes, especially in sports with higher training volumes, that they oftentimes experience low energy availability. And of course, that has a negative impact on both health and performance. So that's why a right energy intake, so sufficient calories for all the training load you have, is really important. And that intake means to have a sufficient amount of carbs, proteins, of course, also healthy and saturated fats, vitamins, minerals, and of course, you can also not forget to hydrate well. Now, with Amacx, we mainly focus on the middle layer because, well, it's just not practical nor ideal for your digestion and absorption during exercise, mainly to have normal foods all the time. So that's really where sports nutrition plays a key role for both performance and recovery. And then with Amacx, as I said, we want to provide the full range of products. So that's why we also have the dietary supplements. And an example I can give there, nowadays in the winter times here in the Netherlands, the sunshine is just not strong enough for our body to synthesize vitamin D. And you cannot get enough vitamin D from your diet alone. So then that's an example where I would recommend to supplement. So that's also what we provide with Amacx. We also have performance supplements like caffeine, for example. Now, something else that I often see is that people are really focused on their race day nutrition instead of really getting their day-to-day nutrition right. So sometimes, well, oftentimes I get the question, okay, can you help me with building my race day nutrition plan? And then I say, of course, when is your race? And then I get the answer, oh, my race is next week. So then I think that's a bit difficult. So what I want to say is that people, they sometimes don't realize that your performance on race day really depends on all the work you've done, the days, the weeks, the months leading up to the race, also, of course, in your nutrition. So if you get your day-to-day nutrition right, you can carry out a higher training volume and load. You can hit those higher intensities. Of course, you can also recover better. You have less injuries. And that also translates in better adaptations that you can get out of your training. And then in the end, of course, you can perform better. So that's really what you want. You want to start your race with a greater capacity. Then lastly here, I want to stress that periodization and personalized nutrition is really important because every athlete and every day is different. So not every athlete will eat the same thing or will need the same thing. And also during your training phases, you will also, if you have a really high intensity training, for example, you will rely more on carbohydrates, for example, than on a recovery day. So that's also where the periodization comes in. Then onto the role of carbohydrates. So for carbohydrates, it's really important to stress the fuel for the work required, and I will come back to that later. So the energy production during trail running is predominantly aerobic. So we use both carbohydrates and fat as our primary fuels. Now, carbohydrates are really our favorite fuel from the body during exercise, and that's especially for higher intensity, higher force exercises. So think about when you have a climb or descent. The technical parts are when you go at a higher pace, your body really relies on carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the most efficient fuel we have. Next to that, so next to the importance for our muscles, carbohydrates are also an essential fuel for our brain. So people often don't realize that. So for cognitive performance, carbohydrates are also really important. And think about, especially during longer trails, the longer you go, you have overnight sections, the technical parts. It's really key that you can, like, your cognitive performance will have a major impact as well. But the downside of our carbohydrates is that the storage capacity in our body is limited. So if you look at the left of the slide, you can see that carbohydrates in the body, they are stored as what we call glycogen. So both in the muscle and in the liver, and also in the blood, carbohydrates are circulating as glucose. Now, on average, that's only around 3,500 kilocalories. So that's not a lot, and that's why it's so important to fuel during exercise as well as before and after. Now, to compare that with our fat stores, they are theoretically unlimited. So especially the more body fat you have, the more kilocalories of fat you have, but that can sometimes go up to, let's say, 100,000 kilocalories to give you a comparison. And it's the main fuel at these lower intensities. However, it's important to realize that even when you're at your peak fat oxidation, that differs between people, but it's on average, let's say 65% of your VO2 max. The fat supplies only like 50% of the energy during the exercise, and the other 50% still comes from carbohydrates. Next to that, fat is a less efficient fuel. So to have the same amount of energy, fat just needs more oxygen, and it also, because of that, cannot produce energy as quickly as carbohydrates, so it cannot provide the energy quick enough for those high force and high intensity efforts, like the climbs, descents, the higher pace, these technical parts that I mentioned before. Now, there are some differences between carbs, and the most important difference is the absorption speeds in the body. So as you can see on the left, it's a bit simplification of how it is. So in general, fibers are absorbed the slowest into the body and sugars the fastest. However, for example, there are some starches that are faster absorbed than some sugars, but in general, sugars are the fastest. So what does that mean? Is that it's also more rapidly available as energy for our muscles, and it also causes less gut issues, which is quite important, especially the longer you go and the faster you go. So that's why also sports nutrition products are based on sugars as type of carbohydrates. Now, to give you an idea, the sugars that are most used in sports nutrition products are the ones you see here. So glucose, maltodextrin, and fructose. So as you can see, glucose, it's what we call a monosaccharide. So it's a single sugar molecule. And then maltodextrin it's actually a long chain of glucose molecules. So it's important to know that maltodextrin works in the same way as glucose in our body, but it tastes less sweet, and it also has a lower osmolality. That means that it has less particles that are dissolved in the fluids. You don't have to remember that, but it's just important to remember that it's a bit faster absorbed, and it also we see less gut issues as well with maltodextrin. And then we have fructose. It's also like glucose monosaccharide, so it's one sugar molecule, and it's a bit sweeter. It's also a bit slower absorbed as the other two. But why we add it to our sports nutrition is what I will explain you in this slide. So probably you've all heard about, okay, I need to take the 2-to-1 ratio. I need to take this ratio or this ratio. There are a lot of things out there on the internet. So I will try to explain you why we use the different ratios in our products. So if you look at this figure, so you see the small intestine where the carbohydrates are absorbed, and then on the right of that you have the blood vessels that brings the carbohydrates to our muscles for energy. So as you can see, glucose and fructose, they use different transporters in our gut. So I always use a metaphor of a door that opens and closes. So if you take in carbohydrates, you can actually take in around 60 grams of glucose per hour. If you take in 60 grams, the door closes, and everything that comes in after that will actually stay behind. There's residue in the gut and cause gut issues, and of course will also not be used as energy for our muscles. That's why to go higher than the 60 grams per hour, we need to add another sugar like fructose, because it uses another entry door. So once the door of glucose is closed, we can still use fructose because it's not saturated yet. So it works at the same time, and that's why you can go to these higher amounts of carbs per hour. That's also what you see here on this graph. So I will guide you through it step by step. On the x-axis, you see the carbohydrate intake in gram per minute. So if you look at the black line, that's 1.2, so that's 60 grams per hour, to give you an idea. And on the y-axis, you see the carbs that are actually burned, so actually used as a fuel for our muscles. Now, if you look at the orange line, so the single carbohydrate source, that means that you would only use glucose, for example. So as you can see, up until 60 grams per hour, you will burn the same energy as if you would use, for example, glucose and fructose. Now, if you see the red line on the graph, that's the multiple transportable carbohydrates. So that means that you add multiple carbohydrate sources. So let's say glucose and fructose. You see that from the moment you pass at 60 grams per hour, so the black line on the graph, you will use way more of what you take in as energy for the muscle. So that's really important. Now, the last thing to highlight here is the white line. So in the middle, so 100% efficiency. That means that you would burn 100% of the amount of carbs you take in. And that's just never how it works. That's just our physiology. Of course, some people are capable to burn more than others. Also, if you do good training and your body is capable of taking more, you can go closer to that white line, but it's just never 100%. But important here is if you mix those two carb sources, you can go closer to that line than with only one single carbohydrate source, especially for the higher intakes. And that's also how we developed our lines. So as you can see here, I already explained it a bit. So the energy line is the blue product line. So every product has 30 grams of carbs per unit in the 2-to-1 ratio. So that means that if you would take in 90 grams, for example, you would have 60 grams of glucose and 30 grams of fructose. Then if you want to go higher, you need to change the ratio a bit. So you need to add a bit more fructose, so you also can absorb more. And that's where the turbo line comes in. So every product here has 40 grams of carbs, so you can go easily up to 120 grams. 120 grams. So we really want to make fueling easy, as it's said here, because if you see some other nutrition brands, they have a lot of different amounts of carb in each product, so that becomes like really difficult in the end to know exactly how much glucose, for example, you got in. And then if you take more than the 60 grams, oftentimes people experience gut issues because it's just not absorbed well. I think that training the gut is one of the most important parts of your nutrition training in leading up to an ultra race. So as it said here, it's really a key part of success. And why? Because it increases the capacity of our gut to both tolerate, but also absorb and use the ingested carbs. So you really minimizes the gut discomfort. And in the end, of course, also you increase the energy. And luckily, our gut is very trainable, just like our muscles. So what about the timing? So when is a good idea to start your gut training? So if you come to me and you ask me for advice a week before the race, that's a bit too late for gut training. So yeah, you don't want to try and squeeze in the gut training in the last weeks. So mostly if I have enough time with an athlete, ideally I would start around 12 weeks before the race. So how to train the gut? Well, the first step is to build your the race nutrition strategy. So you also know, okay, let's try to hit those numbers per hour, and with these types of food, of course, you can still modify that while you train your gut. But it's really important to train your gut with the nutrition you will eventually use in the race. And then another good strategy is to create a kind of a buffer. So let's say you aim for 60 grams an hour maximum during the entire race. Then it's always a good idea to train a bit higher than that, because in trail running you need to be flexible in a lot of ways, and you don't want the case that you end up eating a bit more, but your gut is not used to that and still have gut issues. Now, I talked a lot about carbohydrates, but of course, it's really important as well to train your gut on fluids, especially people with higher sweat rates. They oftentimes they're not capable of taking enough fluids that they actually need. So, of course, I will explain that later as well. You will not just throw numbers to the athletes. Okay, try to drink as much as possible. You, of course, first see how much does the athlete need, and then you train the gut on these amounts of fluids. So some really important tips and tricks. As I already said, start early so you have more time to build up and test and adapt. So when I say build gradually, important here is that don't start immediately with your most important training sessions, because you still want these sessions to be done with quality. And if you start your first gut training session in one that's really important that you cannot finish it, that would be a shame. So pick some trainings that are a bit easier, so you can build up from there. Also, if you're not used to certain amounts of carbs, start at the lower ends, so you can build up and see where your tolerance lies. So you really can test and adapt. Like every week, you can build up, for example, a bit with the amount per hour. Also, you can test different products. There are a lot of products out there. You have chews, gels, if I talk about sports nutrition, but also if you're planning on taking in some normal foods, then it's also a good idea to test that in training, and you can really make it personal that way. Now, the further you go and the more your gut is already adapted, it's also good to include trainings at a higher intensity or longer runs. So trainings that are more similar to the race pace, let's say. So your gut is also trained for those intensities and those longer runs. So I wrote down here, bring a roll of toilet paper with you, because we as practitioners, it's really important that we stress the gut, that we load the gut, and that we, if you really feel uncomfortable, you just need to go through that. It's like if you go out on a training session and your muscles feel fatigued, you will also not just quit, you push through, and that's in the end where you see improvement. And it's a bit the same with the gut. So as I said, final step is really practice your nutrition under race day conditions. That's not only to do with the pace and with the intensity, but also, for example, if you have to run during the race overnight or late in the evening, your gut slows down a bit. So also practice with training the gut in training sessions later in the evening as well. So final tip here, golden rule is nothing new on race day. We say it all the time, but still there are people that just take whatever they can find on the aid station. But my advice is, well, of course you can include products that are in the aid station. Look beforehand what's available and train that if it fits your nutrition plan. But otherwise, really don't be tempted too much, because in my experience, mostly it end up with with the toilet paper, as I said. So then carb loading. So I've already heard a lot of times like, oh, carb loading is it's not necessary for ultra running, but I'm always surprised by that, because it is still really important. And why? Because you really want to maximize your muscle and liver glycogen stores, because as I said, these stores are limited, and there are moments you will not go at really high paces, but there are moments in the race, like a really long climb or a more technical part, or a part where it's a bit where you can go a bit faster, then your body just relies on carbohydrates. So it's really important. So recommendations for carb loading are to start 1 to 2 days before the race with 8 to 10 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram body weight per day. Now, what I see is that a lot of athletes in trail running are not used to carb loading. So then I always say, okay, focus on the 8, so on the lower end of the race, because you really, and also train it before and as well by mirroring a day of 8 grams of kilograms per day, because you don't want to overload, so you already feel bad in the gut before you start. And then I suggest to aim for 3 carbohydrate-rich meals, and also 2 to 3 carbohydrate-rich snacks. Later on, I will give you some examples as well. So some tips and tricks here as well. A low residue meal plan is really a good idea to minimize the gut loss. So, well, minimizing mostly fiber. It also gives you a full feeling, but if you're still feeling full, you can also minimize some unnecessary fats and proteins. Proteins, a lot. If you eat a lot, it's very, it's just it will give you a full feeling. You can also add liquid carbs, which are mostly easier to take in, especially that's also my experience, and energy dense foods if you really have difficulty with a higher amounts. Then onto fluids. So that's hydration is for me as important almost as carbs, but because it's also all connected. As you can see here, on average, we have 60% of our body consists of water. And of course, fluids and the water in our body have a lot of different important roles. But I selected a few that I think are especially key for you, as Fluids are really important for a proper gut flow. It helps with the absorption of nutrients, because if you're dehydrated, for example, you will just also not, your absorption will slow down as well. So you don't want that, and you will have more gut issues as well. And of course, it regulates our core temperature. So all really important aspects. So then to fluids around exercise, I start with what I should recommend. I would recommend before the race or training. So the most important thing here to remember is that try to start every training or race well hydrated, or euhydrated as we call it in more science terms. So a practical tool to check that is in the morning you can check you can ask yourself 3 questions. It's what we call the WUT diagram. So the W from weight, the question you can ask yourself is, okay, is your morning body weight less than 1% of baseline? And baseline is like, if you weigh yourself every day, you have kind of an idea of what the baseline is. Then are you thirsty? And then the other question is, okay, is your morning urine, does it have this dark yellow color? Then if you would answer all the questions with a yes, then you're very likely dehydrated. And if you answer 2 of them with yes, you're likely dehydrated. So what is recommended then is to drink around 5 to 10 mils per kilogram body weight in the 4 hours prior to exercise. Now, if you don't have that much time, you can, and you only, for example, have 2 hours, you can dial that back to 3 to 5 milliliters per kilogram of body weight. And then if you're well hydrated, you can use thirst as a guide, of course. If you have access to lab equipment, you can use other tests that are more precise, but this is really the best practical tool that's out there, and it works really well. Then in hot conditions, it's of course it's really important to cool down as much as possible. You can have external cooling with cooling vests, for example, but also internal cooling with cold fluids, and ice slurries work very well, as well as ice gels. So it has the same working mechanism as an ice slurry. So with Amacx, we also developed an ice gel, but that also contains 30 grams of carbohydrates in our energy line ice gel. We also have a turbo line ice gel with 40 grams of carbs. So then before the race, you combine actually your fluids, the cooling down, and the carbohydrates that you need. Then during exercise, a good starting point for me with athletes is around like a flask of 500 milliliter or 600 milliliter per hour. However, of course, there are a lot of individual differences. So we see that some athletes may need up to even 2 liters per hour in the extremes. So yeah, a key action is really to collect your sweat rate data and put together a proper hydration plan. And yeah, as I mentioned, the majority of the gut issues are all already solved by proper hydration. So that's what what I see in practice is that a lot of people or athletes that complain of gut issues, when you fix their hydration, then the problems are mostly solved already. So that's really important here. Now, how do you measure your sweat rate? Well, again, if you have access, if you know people that have access to a lab, it's of course great, but 95% of the people don't have that. So a really practical tool to do that at home is to use your scale at home. So what you should do is weigh yourself before and after training. And the easiest is to go to the toilet first and weigh yourself naked, because then it's a bit easier in the calculations. And then when you come back, you weigh yourself again, also without your clothes. And you do that in different weather and training conditions, so at different intensities and in hot and cold conditions. And you can, a lot of nutritionists, they have like a spreadsheet in Excel where they fill in all the different data. So you have an idea for yourself. It's like a ballpark. It's not 100% exact, but it's a really good indication to know, okay, in these conditions, I have that sweat rates. And I've put the calculation here as well. So later on, you can press pause and take a closer look. But mainly it's the calculation is your body mass pre and post training. So you distract that, then you add the total fluid intake. So mostly, you know, okay, I drank 1 flask of 500 milliliters. So you add that. Then you, if you would go to the toilet during your training, then of course you have to distract that. Good indication is on average like 200 milliliters of fluid you lose with one toilet break, so you can use the average number here. And then if you divide all of that with your exercise duration, you will have your sweat loss per hour. Of course, as I mentioned, this is individual, and it also depends, for example, how much someone is heat acclimatized. So what we see, if you do heat acclimatation, then actually you will be able to cool down more efficiently, so your sweat rate goes up. So it's good to do these tests at different points in your season as well, because that can change as well with the type of training you do, for example. Now on to sodium replacement, because I know that especially in ultra running, there are a lot of questions around sodium replacements. So I've put this graph on here from a paper that was published last year. Why? Because, yeah, until this paper, actually, there were never really good recommendation or guidelines on how much sodium someone actually needs. And there are a lot of things written on the internet. Okay, you need X or you need a lot of sodium, but actually it was not based on solid scientific research. So before I will guide you through this graph, but before I start, it's really important to see the recommendations for sodium always in balance with your fluid balance, so with the fluid you take in and the fluid losses, because that will also have a big impact on how much sodium you actually need in the end. So if we start at the top, so the exercise duration, actually with the exercise duration that's less than 4 hours, we say, okay, season to taste is enough. And what do we mean with that is that you don't really need extra sodium, but if you feel like you need to eat a salty snack, of course, just go for it. So that's what we mean with season to taste. Now, if you go to the other end, so an exercise duration that's longer than 4 hours, then you really have to look at your hourly sweat rates. So that's where you have to test your sweat rates. If you have really high sweat rates, up to more than 1.8 liters per hour, then we also say season to taste. Why? Because it's really unrealistic to replace all of the fluids you lose. So it's really unrealistic to replace a high percentage of the fluid losses, mostly due to practical issues, but also for the gut tolerance. So if you lose a lot of fluids, but you don't replace all of that, then your sodium concentration in the blood will still be quite high. So you really don't need extra sodium, because then the concentration will be even higher. Now, if your sweat rate is not as high as that, but is less than around 1.8 liters per hour, then you have to look at how much fluids you will replace. So again, if you don't replace a lot of those fluids, it's the same as what I just told. Your blood sodium concentration will increase regardless of the sweat sodium concentration you have, because if you don't replace a lot of those fluids, the concentration will just be high, and if you take extra sodium, it's not a good idea. Then, if you replace a lot of those fluids, that's actually the first time you really need to think about, okay, what is actually my sweat sodium concentration? So that's the last step. And look at this figure later with more closely, but what I want to highlight here is that on average, people have around 40 to 60 millimoles of sodium they lose through their sweat per liter. But if you look at 40, so on the right, 40 millimoles, that's around 900 milligrams on average. Now, if you replace around 70 to 90%, it's again season to taste. So it's still not key to replace the sodium with extra sodium. Only if your sweat sodium concentration is really high, then you will need these replacements. But if you look at these numbers, for example, our sports nutrition products, every gel has already 200 milligrams of sodium, which is not really high, but that's really the lower amount, especially if you compare with other nutrition brands. Some brands have even 600 milligrams in the sports drinks, for example. So then you would already only by eating everything you need for carbs during the hour, you will already have enough sodium, and sometimes even more than what's actually needed for you. That's really what I want to stress here, that most athletes already have enough sodium by eating the sports nutrition or other foods they will eat during their race. And it's only in really specific situations, in the really hot races where people will drink a lot of fluids and they lose a lot of sodium through their sweat. Those people might need extra sodium tablets, but in the most cases, it's really not as needed as is highlighted in a lot of places on the internet. And then aside to that, your sweat sodium concentration can also change. So again, if most day-to-day athletes will not do that, but if you will do heat acclimatation, then you actually, the sweat sodium concentration drops as well. So you become more efficient in cooling down, your sweat rate goes up, and the sodium you lose will go down. There's also a really small influence on how much sodium you had in your last meal, but that's only a small percentage. And then your training status has an influence as well. We see, especially the pro athletes, that they also already have a really low sweat sodium concentration. For example, the winner of last year's UTMB men's race, Tom Evans, he really has a low sweat sodium concentration, and he didn't take any extra sodium in except for the foods that he ate, for example. So onto recovery. So probably you already heard about the 3 R's of recovery. I think that's a really good rule of thumb for recovery. So we have the R for refuel. So that's the carbs. So we have to restore, of course, the glycogen levels in our muscles and livers as we use them during the exercise. Then we have the R from repair. So the proteins, they're really important to support your muscle protein synthesis for the repair of your muscles and also for training adaptations. And then the last R is rehydration. So the fluids are, of course, really important. And so replacing your fluids and electrolytes you lost in sweat. So the Amacx products we have in our recovery line are first, one is the recovery shake. We have them, all of these products in different flavors as well. So the shake contains both carbohydrates, 30 grams of carbohydrates in a 2-to-1 ratio, proteins for the repair, and of course you mix it with water, so you also have the rehydration. So that's all the 3 R's in one product. We have the same product in a bar, so of course you don't have the rehydration, so that of course you still need to drink enough water. And we also have protein shakes for the repair and rehydration. And then we have electrolyte tablets for the rehydration. So I start with the R from refuels, from carbs. As you can see here on the figure, so we call it the recovery prime time is the first 4 hours, and that's especially important when your next exercise is less than 8 hours away, or during high volume training blocks, or during intense competition schedule. These recommendations are mostly important. So it's especially for carbs, it's important to get them in during your recovery as fast as possible. So what's recommended is to have around 1 to 1.2 grams of kilograms per hour during the first 4 hours of recovery. And best here is to have fast absorbed carbohydrates like maltodextrin, for example. Our products have a combi of glucose and fructose to replenish both our muscles and liver stores. So that's quite a lot of carbohydrates. I will give you an example later on as well. But of course, after you have your recovery shake, for example, it doesn't stop, your recovery doesn't stop there. So you really have to prioritize the total amounts of carbs you need and the energy intake that are in line with your training load, of course. So if you don't meet these recommendations, so if your carbohydrate intake is less than this 1.2 grams per kilogram per hour during that window of 4 hours, then protein intake at the same time can help to fasten up your glycogen replenishment. So that's what you also see here on the graph. So on the x-axis, you have the carbohydrate rate, so the grams of kilograms per hour. So the red line is what is recommended per hour. And then on the y-axis, you have like how much glycogen you replenish. So as you can see here, the solid line is if you would take only carbohydrates, and the dotted line is when you have a mixture of carbohydrates and protein. So if you take enough carbohydrates, so more than the 1.2, then you see that extra protein does not have an influence on your glycogen replenishment rates. However, if you're not able to take in that amount of carbohydrates, for example, especially after intense exercise, you don't feel like eating, your appetite is suppressed. So then protein really can help to speed up that process. So then it's recommended to have the combi with proteins, and that's also the amount that's recommended that we have in our products for one serving. Then onto the repair, so the proteins. So it's recommended to have 0.3 to 0.4 grams of kilograms after exercise. That's on average around 20 grams of protein. However, it's important to include protein in every meal. It's the same with carbohydrates. It doesn't stop after your first recovery shake. The recovery goes on for a long time. You can, for example, also have a protein-rich snack before bed, because then you have a really long time where you're sleeping without giving what your muscles need to recover. So we have our protein deluxe, which contains whey protein, so high quality protein, but we also have vegan variants. And in that product, we use a mix of different plant-based proteins. We also add an additional important amino acids, leucine, that is really important for our muscle growth. So you can achieve the same recovery with both products. Then the last are rehydration. So if rapid rehydration is important, then it's recommended to replace 150% of the fluids you lost. And why is it not 100%? Because your body continues to lose those fluids through sweat and urine, of course. Once you stop, you still sweat. You have to go to the bathroom. So that's really important. Ideally, you start early and you drink small regular amounts, because if you drink a large volume all at once, of course you need to go to the toilet faster, and then you don't retain these fluids. You can also include electrolytes to support your thirst response, and again to improve your fluid retention, so that's really helpful. Now, if you have a really long recovery window, which oftentimes if you do a big race, you have a longer recovery window, then it's mostly sufficient to get enough fluids and electrolytes through the recovery meals and drinks you will have. Now, the cherry juice plus is maybe especially people that also like to watch cycling have seen this product. For example, in the Tour de France, our riders take it immediately as first thing after they cross the finish line. So first of all, it's good for refueling and rehydration. So it contains 30 grams of carbohydrates, again in the 2:1 ratio, and also 500 milliliters of fluids to boost your post-exercise rehydration. However, the most important ingredient in this product is the high and standardized amount of anthocyanins. So anthocyanins are polyphenols, and so they have an antioxidant working mechanism. So what they do is they improve the recovery of your muscle damage and sore muscles. So if a fast recovery is key, then it's a really good product. However, here it's also important to stress that during your training, your body, of course, creates a lot of stress, and that stress, that signal, is very important for your training adaptations. So during your training, during a training phase where your focus is really on, I want to maximize my training adaptations, then eating really high amounts of antioxidants or these high amounts of anthocyanins is not ideal, because you will blunt your training adaptations. So it's really good to use the cherry juice strategically, ideally when fast recovery takes priority over those long-term adaptations. So it's perfect during your taper phase, for example, if you have a multi-day event, a multi-stage race, for example. If you have back-to-back competitions so close to each other, then it's ideal for fast recovery. And next to that, the tart cherries also naturally contain melatonin, so it can help you reducing the time you need to fall asleep. And of course, sleep is super important for every athlete's recovery. And important to say here is that our products are informed sports, so that means that we batch test every single product and substances. So yeah. Further on, so to the training, important to say here is really be mindful that when your training load increases, your energy needs increase as well. I see that with athletes that's mostly that are new to trail ultras. It's the first time they go into these longer distances. They increase their training loads, but they actually forget to increase their energy needs. So that's really important. And then secondly, also to have a periodized approach. So you must fuel the sessions where carb are the main source of fuel, but you don't need the same amount of carbs. You don't need high carbs every day. So I gave some examples here where you really need to focus on the carbs, are with trainings, for example, hill trainings, then you will do strides or VO2 max reps. Also, interval training is really, your body really relies on carbs, and of course, the longer training sessions as well. So for these trainings, it's really important to look, okay, how will my week look like? And then you plan ahead. If you say, okay, on Tuesday, I have an interval training, you might start with having a higher carb dinner the day before at Monday evening. So you can really fuel for your quality sessions. And yeah, if you train for an ultra, I would really say to focus on maintaining a minimum of 6 kilograms of carbs per day. What I mostly see is people are really lower than that. So a lot of people are around 3 to 5 grams per kilograms per day, which is just mostly not enough with the training load that they have. So if you really focus on that, you can turn your poor quality sessions into higher quality sessions, and in the end, you will get way more out of your training. So I will give some examples here. I will not go through them like too detailed, but please, if you rewatch the recording, you can pause here as well. Important to say here is really understand the purpose of your training session. So again, if your training is to enhance performance, so you have a really quality training session, then the focus should always be on carbohydrates. So again, start thinking about that already the evening before, have a higher carbohydrate meal. And then for example, you have a quality long run later in the morning, already focus on carbs during breakfast. You can have a small carbohydrate-rich snack pre-training, and then afterwards, of course, you have to focus on the recovery. So still, you need carbs, but also protein in that phase. Then on to the tapering periods. So that it depends. The length, of course, depends on the intensity of the training phase you had, and it's generally a bit longer also when you will go do the longer distances. But overall, what it means is that your training volume will drop and your intensity decreases. So logically, you will also have to reduce your overall energy intake and particularly your carbohydrate intake. What you can also do, as I already said, is to support your recovery already with the cherry juice products. So you can take 1 or 2 per day during this phase. And next to that, you can also opt to have a beet shot. A beet shot contains nitrate, and it improves the efficiency of your oxygen use in the muscles. So you can take 1 or 2 shots as well, beginning 5 to 7 days before the race. And I will highlight here as well that if you do that on the race day itself, you will also have a last beet shot 2 to 3 hours before the race. Then the last part of the tapering periods is the carb loading process. I already spoke about that earlier. So I would, if you're not used to it, especially target the lower end of the race, so 8 grams of kilograms per day. So I gave an example here of a meal plan for 1 day for 70 kilogram athletes that has a low residue diet. Of course, there are people with that follow a plant-based or diet, for example. Then of course you have to swap that here in the plan, but also what you can consider is to integrate a low FODMAP diet, and that means a diet low in fermentable carbs. So for example, wheat and so pasta is really high in fermentable carbs. So then you can swap your pasta with rice, for example. Bread as well is high in the FODMAP diet. You can swap that with gluten-free bread, for example. And what we see in research is that if you would have only carbs that are really high in the FODMAP, then you feel you have more gut issues, you feel bloated because they produce more gas. But some people also, they don't experience these symptoms. So if you experience a lot of gut issues during your carb loading, then you can really try to integrate this type of diet. We see that it works really well. Then on to your pre-race meal. So what's recommended? Of course, it depends on when you start your race. Of course, in trail running, that can be on every time of the day. But in general, have your pre-race meal 1 to 4 hours before the start, and then so the more time you have beforehand for your meal, I would suggest leaning more towards the 3 to 4 grams per kilograms of carbohydrates. If you have only, let's say, 1 to 2 hours, I would also go more to the lower end of that range and really choose easily digestible foods. So also keep your protein moderate and your fat and fiber low as well to reduce your gut issues, because if you would have a meal that's really high in fat and fiber, protein as well, your absorption will slow down. You will feel more full as well. So you, especially before the race, I experience it as well. You have a bit of raised nerves, so that triggers the gut. As well. Some people can handle more fiber, for example, but it's like with everything I tell you today. It's really personal. It's trial and error. It's to really find where your tolerances lie and your preferences. And of course, don't forget to drink sufficient fluids to start your race well hydrated. That's really key. Then for your race day nutrition, I cannot stress it enough, but practice your race nutrition in training first. And then I made a split between the single stage race and a multi-day or multi-stage race. So in general, for a single stage race, let's say a day that's up to 24 hours. Of course, that can be a bit more as well, depending on the length. But the most important thing here is to prioritize your hourly carbohydrate intake and don't aim to try to replace every calorie you burn. So don't try to look at your watch to what your Garmin says, like so many calories burned. It's really key here to get the carbohydrates you need in. Also, what we see in research is 1 day of an energy deficit really does not have a meaningful impact on your performance. There are some studies done as well. At the top of my head, in the Marathon des Sables, they did the research and they saw that only after day 3, the energy deficit had an impact on the performance. So before that, the impact on performance was if you had sufficient carbohydrate, and also, of course, also your hydration had more impact. Then onto the multi-day or multi-stage race. So here you still want to focus on the carbohydrate intake, but also you want to limit the accumulation of your energy deficit. You will always have some deficits because the amounts of energy that you burn is just really, it's extremely high. So it's almost physiologically impossible to absorb as much as you lose, but really try to limit the accumulation. So get as much energy in, as I said, ideally heavily on carbs to reduce the risk of hypoglycemia that impacts your performance. Also, energy-dense foods can be helpful as well. And in these races, it's good to also include some fat and protein. In both cases, it depends on what you like, of course. A lot of athletes that are really used to sports nutrition don't have problems with only using sports nutrition during a single stage race. Other people tend to have more normal foods in as well. But that's just see what you're most comfortable with. The most important thing in the end is that you're able to eat the foods to have enough carbohydrates. So lastly, for those multi-stage races or multi-day races, prioritize also easily digestible foods. And as I said, foods you're comfortable with and you will be able to eat. Of course, I will come back to that later, but of course, every race, your preferences will change as well. Sometimes you feel more like a salty snack, sometimes more like sweet. So it's really important to have a range of different options with you. So more on focused on the recommendations for carbohydrate intake. Well, for the distances in ultra running, it's recommended to have up to 90 grams per hour. It's really difficult to say, okay, you need exactly that amount for the entire race. First of all, unless you have access to the lab again, you will not know how much your body will actually burn at different intensities. However, the higher the intensity is, the higher your carbohydrate need to be, and also a really good indicator is how much you can tolerate already. So if you will take in way more than what you're burning, you're also more prone to gut issues. But also if you are trained for higher intakes, you just can go more closely to the upper limit or even higher. So we already see in research that the athletes can go up to those higher intakes. But of course, it also depends on logistics, and also really important, trail running and ultra trail is the differences between other sports like marathon, for example. People will run at the same pace almost the entire race. In ultra running, it's sometimes you have a really big climb, sometimes it's flat. It depends also between different races, so you will never need the same amount of carbs every hour. So you really have to look at, okay, what are the demands of the course? So if there is a really big climb, okay, I need a higher carb intake, then during a flatter section, my body needs a bit less. Also, tactics play a big role. If you decided beforehand on that part, I really want to accelerate, especially the more professional athletes, they are like, okay, that part, it's really good to attack, for example, then they will also have more carbs in that section. And a really good strategy that I heard from the nutritionist of Tom Evans, he uses a red, orange, green light system. So because the race, of course, is really long, it's difficult to remember, especially if you're so fatigued. Okay, what do I need at this moment? So they work with, they divide the course in different zones, let's say. So in the red part, he knows, okay, this is the red part. I need to take more carbs in at this moment because there will, for example, there will be a climb coming up, or during the green section, he knows, okay, I can go a bit lower on the carbs now because at this time I don't need as much, for example. So some other tips and tricks. Most of them are also related to gut issues, because we see that this, together with flavor fatigue, really key factors in ultra trail running. So fuel from the start. We see that if you wait with fueling for a long time, then the blood flow is directed away from the gut, especially to your working muscles, and that results oftentimes in extra gut issues. So really fuel from the start early, so to keep your gut going, as well as have small frequent intakes, so your gut keeps working. And also don't forget your fluids. Again, if you're dehydrated, you will also experience more gut issues. You will not absorb the nutrients you get in as well as when you're hydrated. And then I've already mentioned it. So running overnight increases the risk of gut issues because the gut slows down. So in that period, you might look at more, it's easy to digest options. You might think, okay, in that period, I don't want to overload my gut. Sometimes people use strategies like, okay, 2 hours, I go a bit lower on the carbs. Then the next 2 hours, I go a bit higher again. It's really finding what works for you. It's just important to notice how the body works, or the body changes overnight as well. What I see is that liquids are really a good and practical strategy on more technical parts. If you didn't think about that and you just planned to take some solid foods or some bars with you, and it's just impractical to open it. You will lose maybe a bit of time because you have to stop to open it, or to take your food. So liquids is it's really practical in this case. And also important to remember, there's no magic recipe that works all the time. So like I said, you can do exactly the same race twice, but the second time, for example, you crave other types of foods. So if you have, if the race has crude aid station, for example, really make sure that you have a range of different options where you can choose from at that moment. Okay, I now want something that's a bit more salty, for example, or a bit more sweet, and then you have the options, and you will eat automatically more as well. A practical tip I'm thinking about what you can do is organize this in a way that okay, these products, if I take it, it has around these so many grams of carbs, so you can still hit the targets, carbohydrate targets you need to hit. So flavor fatigue is also a reason that we see that athletes are the reason why athletes sometimes are underfueled, because they just don't like the taste anymore of the product. They just cannot get it in. They're sick of all the sweetness or whatever. And it's especially a challenge the longer the race. A solution here may be to mix and match. So not only the flavors, so not only change up the sweetness and the saltiness, but also textures really have a big impact. Product type. So you might switch up between sports nutrition and normal foods. But important to still meet your fueling targets, of course. And always individualize to your preferences, tolerances, and also logistics, of course. What you can do is break your race into different nutrition blocks here. So what you can do is, okay, in this block, I will focus more on sweet products, and then I will switch it up. You can create your own entire strategy, what feels best for you, but then within each block you can still plan your intake per hour there. I would suggest to use sports nutrition really as your base. They are designed for the best absorption and less gut issues, but you can also add, for example, if you want to change up flavors, some savory options, like pretzel or rice ball, and then, as I said, really swap these products smartly. So okay, if I take a small bag of pretzels, I know it has, for example, 25 grams of carbs. You can replace it with a gel, for example. So really understand what's in the products that you have, and don't just be tempted to take whatever is at the aid station, especially the cheeses and the salamis are in France or Italy. It's always tempting, but it just it will just not help you. Then post-race nutrition. So tip here is to have a cherry juice immediately after crossing the finish line. Then focus also on the 3 R's that we discussed. So you can have a recovery shake, for example. It's really practical and convenient. You have what you need without thinking about how many grams do I have in now or the protein, but then still focus on these carbs and proteins in the other meals and snacks. And if you have a race and you have a long recovery time, like just go and eat whatever you like afterwards. Go to the bar with your friends, have a pint or whatever. That's really okay. So the last part, the supplements, I will focus, because I'm already talking quite a lot, focus on the performance supplements that might be of benefit for you. But as you can see here, with Amacx, you also have different health supplements. So I will start with beta-alanine. So it's an amino acid that's together with another amino acid called histidine forms carnosine in our muscles. So carnosine is stored mainly in our muscles. And the main role of carnosine is that it acts as a buffer. So during higher intensity efforts, your body produces I'm thinking in Dutch now, hydrogen, the H plus. So the acids build up, and that can lead to muscle fatigue. So if you supplement with carnosine, that helps to neutralize this acid. So the fatigue is postponed, let's say. So this is really effective for the longer hill reps, for example, because we see that beta-alanine works well for exercises between 1 to 12 minutes around that. So you can do a loading phase for a couple of weeks, and then we recommend to do a maintaining phase afterwards. And important as well to mention here is that our capsules are slow release, and that's important because sometimes with beta-alanine, a side effect can be like a tingling of your fingers, for example, which is a normal reaction. It's nothing bad, but with slow release capsules, we see that it's not as common, this tingling in the fingers. Then creatine can be a supplement that you might consider. So creatine, of course, is already part of what we say a normal meat, an omnivore diet. Creatine phosphate is it's a main fuel source during really all-out efforts. So during really short and explosive intensities. So if you supplement with creatine, your creatine pool in the muscles will be greater. So that means, for example, if you do some strides, for example, that you will be able to recover faster between strides, and you will also be able to do more repetitions. So in the end, it will improve your training because you just can do more. You can also use it for VO2 max. It also is effective for VO2 max reps, for strength training as well. The same here, will be able to do more repetitions. And in the end, of course, it will benefit you. So creatine is really a training supplement, as we call it. Well, it's not needed to stop with creatine. You can just taking it every day. But if you want to be sure, you can stop using it 3 to 4 weeks before the race, because if you use creatine, you will also build up a bit more fluids in the body. So some athletes prefer to stop some weeks before the race, so they don't have the added weight when the race starts. Also here you can have a loading phase of creatine and then maintain your creatine levels with 1 scoop a day. That's around 5 grams of creatine that you then take every day. It doesn't really matter when during the day you take it, what is more convenient to you. Then lastly, caffeine. So caffeine acts on the central nervous system by blocking the fatigue signals, let's say. So caffeine increases really your focus and pacing and reduces the feeling of fatigue, so the perception of effort. Caffeine supplements are in different forms. So you have capsules, but you also have gels with caffeine, and both in the capsules and gels, the effects are after around 60 minutes. There are some differences between individuals, but that's on average. Important to know as well for when you want to take it strategically during the race, and then it can the benefits maintained for a couple of hours. So, well, just having a coffee as a, if you would see it as a supplement, let's say, is not really reliable because the caffeine content always changes a bit. So if you really want to know, okay, I want to take in that much amount of caffeine, it's really, you would need first of all a lot of coffees, and it's just difficult to exactly know how much caffeine it contains. That said, if you are a coffee drinker, like, you don't have to stop drinking coffee to have more effect during the race. You just keep your habitual intake that you're used to. So on race day, so before the race, well, yeah, oftentimes, of course, the recommendations in science, they say, okay, 45 minutes to 1 hour before the race, take your supplement of caffeine. However, for ultra endurance races, these races are very long. So if you would already use a supplement before the race, what I mostly see is that athletes really start too fast. It's already athletes mostly go already fast in the beginning because everyone is enthusiastic. There are a lot of people. So that's something you should really consider. Of course, as I said, it does mean you should skip your habitual coffee. If you are used to drinking a coffee with your breakfast, please don't skip that. What you might consider is having caffeine suppletion when you have a night start, because of course during the night your body is also a bit confused. So it might help you with the sharpness and alertness you need during the night, especially if races already start soon with a climb or a technical section in the dark. Yeah, it might be a good option. Then during the race, as I said, timing wise, I would say 6 minutes before you want to have the effects. So before decisive moments, like if you look at the course profile, there is like this really big climb that you that you want to take caffeine for, then okay, maybe you can put a timer on your watch, and then 1 hour before the climb arrives, you can take in caffeine. Of course, it's easy through a gel. Then you also combine it with carbs. At the final of the race is another good example, or overnight, as I said. So some tips and tricks. Oftentimes recommendations say around 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, but what we also see also in military training, but also in ultramarathons, that repeated low doses of 1 to 2 milligrams per kilogram of body weight can really be a good strategy, and also a tolerated strategy that can help the athletes. So yeah, there are genetic differences in between how people respond to caffeine. Some people are more sensitive than others. So again, trial and training first. It's not that higher is always better. It's just that some people are a bit less sensitive to caffeine, but really trial that in training. And of course, the other side is that you really don't want to take the extreme doses because that can cause nervousness and anxiety and also sleep disruption. So be aware of that as well. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. I can imagine there are still a lot of questions, but that's why I'm here. So I'm really happy to answer those for you.
So, Julie, we have one question here, and wait a second. Any types of products to help counter stomach issues during the race?
Well, the best advice is, I can give you is, as I mentioned a lot already, for gut issues is hydration. Next to that, of course, it's better to have products that include really fast absorbing carbs, for example, because if you take a product that contains a lot of other micronutrients like protein, fat, or products especially that are high in fat, that will really slow down your digestion and absorption. We see that the emptying of the stomach to the gut just goes slower. So mostly that also causes more gut issues, especially if you are exercising, because there is just less blood that flows through the gut because your muscles need a lot of blood as well. So I would say really focus on what is in the product. So the faster that it's absorbed, the better for the gut, as well as being hydrated. That's really important. There is, I believe, some research as well about ginger that might help as well for gut issues, but I'm not specifically sure about the research that has been done in that area. But it's really interesting to look that up. That might, who knows, be something that's more common in the future.
And the question here is, what about increasing sodium to fight or avoid cramps?
That's a really good question. So I think that's always the number one question, the cramps. So what we see in research is that sodium actually doesn't really have a lot of influence on the muscle cramps. It's mostly being dehydrated that has more effects on the muscle cramps. And actually, it's a really complex what causes a muscle cramp is really complex, and we still don't know the exact answer, but it's mainly also a neuromuscular effect. So, for example, if people are not conditioned to the race environments, like the muscle fatigue is like it's also really has a big influence on the cause of muscle cramps. But yeah, what we see in research is that just by taking in more sodium, it's not what will prevent you for having muscle cramps. It's being dehydrated will have way more influence on that. And yeah, and it's just go ahead.
The mic.
Yeah, sorry. The interesting question from Sanya, actually, Julie. Does it make sense to add L-carnitine to the glucose and fructose mix to also get more energy from fats? Some brands have gels with L-carnitine.
Well, For energy, not necessarily, no. Like your body has a lot of fat that you can use, and if you take a product, I would really focus on getting your carbohydrates in. Yeah.
I
In
think
my
that
opinion, there is no added benefits for adding L-carnitine to the products.
yeah, because I think that she meant that maybe L-carnitine will support the usage of the fat as a primary source of energy. I think that that's how she meant.
Yeah, so that's a good question. What is important here to mention is like, of course, what you want is something we call metabolic flexibility. So as an athlete, you want to be able to be good in your fat oxidation, but also in your carbohydrate oxidation. And because ultra running a lot of times is at a lower intensity, of course, in comparison, your body will also uses more fat as a fuel as in other sports. So what we see as well is there was a big rise, for example, in the low carb, high fat diet, because of course, with such a diet, we see that athletes will improve their fat oxidation. However, first thing, a lot of athletes in ultra running without this diet already have a really good fat oxidation. It's like the athletes with the best fat oxidation that we see. Why? Because of the extreme training volumes they already have. So a lot of times their glycogen is already depleted in other trainings that they do just because the load is so high, and like apart from the diet. Now, the side effects. So the second thing about that is that the downside is that your carbohydrate oxidation will be impacted negatively. So what we see is people that are on that diet will have a really high fat oxidation. That's true, but their carbohydrate oxidation is way less efficient. So that means that during their race, you just rely on carbs so much, especially during those moments that I already mentioned, during when your pace is higher, during climbs, and actually, yeah, a lot of moments. So what we see is that actually the diet affects the performance in a negative way, because even without the diet, what we see is athletes in these sports already have a really good fat oxidation, and when they take in the carbs that they need at what I explained with periodization at the right moments, then they will improve their performance way better. So yeah, I really understand where the question comes from, but I think it's really important to highlight that by focusing too much on improving your fat oxidation, that it mostly goes together with minimizing or diminishing your ability, the ability of your body to burn the carbohydrates, yeah, as energy.
Mhm. And Luca asked, after taking gels, is it recommended to take some water right after for the better absorption?
That's a really good question. So differences between gels, there are, between different sport brands, there are a lot of differences between gels, and a lot of times there is in the concentration of the gels. So there are some gels on the market that are really concentrated. So there is a higher amount, let's say, of carbohydrates for the fluid. So the higher a concentration in the gel, the slower the absorption will be. We say it's the emptying of the gut is slower. So the emptying of the carbohydrates to the intestines is slower. It will also cause a bit more gut issues. So if you have a really concentrated gel, it's really recommended to have to really hydrate good as well. Now, with other sports nutrition brands and Amacx, for example, what we do is we call it a drink gel. So you will see it as well in the packaging. The first ingredient in our gel is water, actually. So the concentration is not that high. So you actually don't need extra water when you take in the gel, because the concentration is already lower, so it can be better absorbed. And it's also we do that because we really want to minimize the gut issues. Of course, you can never minimize it with 100%. You still need to train the gut, but yeah, I would recommend, if you have high concentrated gel, then yeah, take in some water as well.
And we have the last question. Wait a second. Yeah, where it's now. Yeah. Is there a difference in how fast the energy is obtained from the liquids comparing with gels and solid foods?
That's a bit a similar question with what we just discussed. So with liquids, most of the times, because you add a lot of hydration, of course, it goes a bit faster than solids, especially solids with more fat and protein in there as well. It's absorbed slower. It can also be I'm absolutely not saying that it's not a good thing, because sometimes in the race you just imagine that in the race you don't have an aid station for a really long time. Then it can be really good to have the energy released a bit more slower. So you can really think about it strategically in that way. And also talking about getting your energy in through hydration. I think it's, especially if you need to replace a lot of fluids, it can be really good to have always have one flask with carbohydrates, because then you're sort of forced to have your fuel in, and then you also have the hydration in. It's really individual as well. Some people prefer a lot of their carbs through liquids. I really like it, for example. Of course, you have to see that you don't over hydrate yourself with fluids that can also give some gut issues if you take in too much, but that's always trial and error. Last thing I want to add here is that you can, of course, if you make your own drink, so if you use like powder for sport drinks, for example, you can of course make it as concentrated as you like, but really high concentrated drinks also need more training. So if you're planning to do that, really train that in practice as well.
And the question from Sanya: are jellies absorbed slower than gels?
Are gels?
Jellies. The
Jellies.
chew bars.
The chew bars. Well, it's if the chew bar has, for example, for our products, I can say that if it has the same type of carbohydrates and the same main ingredients, then you just can mix and match. It will be as fast absorbed as a gel. What we see is that's more with bars, for example. Just to make a bar, you automatically have to add a bit of fat and fiber just to create a structure. So even with the same carbs in the product, that's also what we see with our oat bar, for example. The digestion and absorption is a bit slower. You will still have the same amount of energy in the end because it has the same amount of carbs, but because there's a bit of fat and protein added to that, not a lot, but that will cause a bit that will slow it a bit, but between gels and jellies, if the both products use the fast absorbed carbohydrates and nothing else, then you can just it's more or less the same, let's say.
The question from Mateo, which of your products will be available on aid stations? So we will use energy line on the aid stations. That means the blue line of the products. So 30 grams of carbs in 2:1 ratio. And yeah, I don't find any other questions.
Right.
Maybe someone, if someone want to ask something, you can also turn on microphone and you can also ask live.
Maybe this is it.
This is it. And I think, well, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think Gregor can always answer some other questions later
There is
on.
another.
So there is, but I can't understand correctly. You can also, Anita, if you can also ask in Slovenian, is it available to buy in casual sport markets in Slovenia? You mean if you can buy Amacx in Slovenia, then the answer is yes. You can buy
Maybe
Amacx
store. Maybe she thought stores.
I think so, yeah. So we are presented at all A2U shops, so A2U, in all A2U shops in Slovenia, so in Šenčur, in Kranj, in Ljubljana, in Novo Mesto, in Koper, in Celje, in Maribor. Then you have Maxi Sport Čerin in Ljubljana. Then in Celje you have BL Sport. In Maribor you have Den Sport. Then we have Bike Center Cerknica in Cerknica. And we have, how it's called, Žiga Sport. It's Sport 11 in Šenčur, Kranj also. So we have many sports now in Intersport and in Extremital. We don't have Amacx yet, but we are working on already. So we are quite heavily presented in a lot of shops in Slovenia. But yeah, we still see the room for improvement. If you are from Ljubljana, we will also add Amacx to Sport R probably next week or in the next 2 weeks. So each week there is some new shops on the map.
Right. But I think oh, go ahead.
No, sorry, but just to finish. But you can always buy from online store, and delivery is quite fast. Let's say if you order today, tomorrow morning they will send the parcel already, and on Monday the shipment will arrive. So it's next day delivery. And Yuli, now the word is yours.
I think it was great that you know all of the stores by head, but I think it's also a good bridge to introduce the discount code we have for everyone attending the webinar. As you can also buy the products online, of course. I think maybe Gregor, you can tell everyone a bit more about it.
Yeah. So if you jump on laprimafit.com, you can choose all Amacx products, and you can also enter code Ultra Trail for the discount. And for the first orders, we will also add our nice Amacx water bottles for free, just as a gift, because we want that you try the products, you test the products. Now it's still the right time to do it, because the delivery, as I said, is quite fast all over the Europe, especially to the German markets and to Slovenian and Croatian market. And I hope that we will see each other in Vipava. As said, I will be presented personally, and also Julie, if someone will need any questions or any additional infos, please send an email to amax@laprimafit.com, and we, together with Julie, we will answer the questions. Or you can also write a message on social medias. We have social media accounts of Amacx. We have Amacx Slovenia, then we have Amacx Hrvatska for Croatia, then we have Amacx Deutschland for Germany, and we have also Amacx Österreich for Austria. So we are available all around. don't hesitate to ask the questions, because there is no stupid questions.
Exactly.
The only stupid question is the one that is not answered. So always, please answer what you need. You can also call us on the online shop. You will find both email and the phone number. And if our colleagues, because they're not nutritionists, all of them, if they will not have the answer, they will write down the contact and the name, and we will reach out together with Julie and give you all the answers.
Great. Thank you again, both of you, for hosting the webinar. I'm really happy we could do this together. It's a sport close to my heart as well, so it's really nice to meet all of you guys, and good luck to all of you with the last part of your preparation, and of course with the race, and enjoy the mountains, I would say.
Just one finish word, Anya, if I can, because we know I know that we have a spot as a partner of you. Julie, we have the ticket for you, so you can decide which race are you going to. Now we have a challenge.
That's a good one.
We are inviting you to beautiful Slovenia to attend one of the races. So you have 3 choices which race to attend.
I will look at my schedule. If I'm available, I'm always down.
All right.
Yeah, would be good.
Obviously, you're very welcome to come, Julie, and really also from our side, from UTV, thank you very much for your immensely, I don't know, like really huge pile of knowledge. I was just like in awe listening to you. Thank you very much. I actually really believe that this was very invaluable for our runners, for our warriors. Lots of knowledge to take in before the last preparations. Thank
Let
you
it
very
sink
much, Julie.
in. Rewatch the recording, and yeah. Thank you as well for having me, and have a nice evening to all of you.
You too.
Have a nice evening, all of you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye. See you guys.
Bye.